there. This is Benjamin Morse. It's Friday night, and this is this week's episode of Explain Yourself. This is my first week on the show, taking over for Will and Kevin, who were gracious enough to have me on last week and give me some pointers on carrying the show forward. So I'm excited to get started. We have our first guest, my first guest, Sarah Bhatia, who is the founder and CEO of Comics from Sydney, Australia. And comics is basically an end-to-end ecosystem for indie comic creators that helps bring their comic ideas to life. So, Sarah, thanks for coming on, and basically tell us a little bit about comics.
Thank you for having me on the show, Ben. It's my pleasure to be here. So, Comics.one, as the website is an end-to-end ecosystem for indie comics. What that means is at the moment we've launched a marketplace for digital comics where people can actually buy back issues from the directly from indie creators. Indie creators get a storefront for their brand of like for the brand of comics. For example, if you have a brand of comics called, say, Coffee Time Comics, right? So that's you get a storefront by that name. You can bring in your entire team, your penciler, your inker, your colorist, everyone on the platform, and then you can post your books, sell digital copies of your books. At the moment, we want to extend this to crowdfunding and
Mhm.
also to complete the whole cycle. The creation cycle of comics as it stands today, for especially for indie creators, is they go crowdfunding first, get their first critical mass, get the
Mhm.
comic
Yeah.
to life, bring it to life, and then they start selling those issues separately, and then for the next issue run they do it again.
Yeah.
So my idea is that once this crowdfunding uh, run ends, your issues, the sales of your issues basically falls down significantly, right?
Yeah. Of course.
um, and Y platform is basically all about keep extending the life of your back issues and your catalog.
Mhm.
So you can keep earning from your existing catalog, and then also for the new issues you can get them crowdfunded.
No.
The ecosystem part. Sorry,
Oh
Ben,
no.
go
Go
for
ahead.
it.
Just saying that sounds great. That's a obviously, like even if you want to bring your comics, your previous issues back in a new campaign, that new campaign gets really complicated because you've got to manage how much backstock do you have, do you get things printed up, and it really complicates things. So that is I can certainly see how that would streamline some things.
Exactly. So one of the things that we have lined up already for crowdfunding is, since you already have your entire catalog on the website, you can easily add your entire catalog
Yeah.
and then organize it into bundles the way you want it. Um, Doing that again and again is for every single issue is so stressful.
Mhm.
Um, Also, the big key differentiator we'll start having is from a lot of other websites that already exist, is we want to support print, and we because we know that comics is a collector's medium, right?
Yeah.
You always want to have that lovely physical copy of the book in your hands. And since shipping nowadays is so expensive everywhere around the world, you may have fans in, say, Australia and United Kingdom
Mhm.
or Canada. They don't want to spend $23 to ship a comic over
Sure.
to Canada for like a $15 comic, right? So
Sometimes it's
uh,
even more than that. So yeah, absolutely.
exactly. So we're actually working with to build relationships with local printers in each of these countries who have done this for several decades,
Mhm.
and they know their craft inside out, and they're reliable enough for somebody in the US to actually just give them a copy of their book, and they can print it and fulfill it for them on their behalf.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what we are working on at the moment, uh, with trying to form relationships with local printers.
Yeah, that's great because that's something I found when I was doing my first campaigns. Like people would ask me, "Are you going to do?" At first, I was going to do just the U.S. for that reason. I had people asking me, from England, from Canada, a few other places,
And I didn't want to tell anybody, no, I don't want to do it. I tried to find printers overseas that maybe I could get some one-off stuff printed there, and then go to, have it shipped within the country. So just to cut down that big initial cost. And it was something, as a creator and running a campaign, was just way too much time to do within,
Yeah.
the campaign time. So, and I've seen people start to do that, set up networks where, somebody's like, oh yeah, here's a place you can print in Australia and ship, within there, and just avoid that huge burden, which is, I mean, it's almost insurmountable to send something, at this point, even to send from US to Canada is almost really not worth doing for one floppy. It's so crazy expensive, and many times I think doesn't even make it there. There are huge delays. So it's really awesome to see somebody trying to get ahead of that. But I want to ask you, like, so you're doing all this stuff for I guess, like, kind of a back end platform, making things easier for creators. Do you write comics, or just a fan? And what was your journey to get to this, to get to creating this platform?
Absolutely. So I have been a fan of comics all my life. I think when I was really young, my father brought me a copy of X-Men by Jim Lee and Chris Claremont, and that just hooked me onto comics for life. Like that's the run from the early '90s.
Sure.
Yeah, so I mean, I have grown up reading a lot of Marvel and also DC. Batman has always been my favorite. um there's also plenty of characters of all people. Like, I just love Firestorm, and uh I don't know, I have this thing for characters with fire coming out of their heads. So Ghost Rider and Firestorm, I just love them both equally.
It's a good
So
visual.
yeah. So yeah, I have been a fan of comics all my life, and I am also a writer myself. So a few years ago, I did a Kickstarter of my own with a few other people. I was part of an anthology and part of the production team, and we ran the Kickstarter together. And that actually sparked this idea in my head, because I saw a lot of unknowns, and especially like once the campaign ended, there
Hmm.
were one Kickstarter is an amazing platform, but it's not tailored for comics. It's a very generic
Oh yeah.
platform, right? Like it
Yeah.
has yeah. So just that, like, that bit where you need to make comics fit in neatly with the platform, you have to do a few things to do and to get there.
Yeah.
Obviously, with Zoop coming in, that's changing,
Yeah.
but
Oh yeah.
then what happens after the crowdfunding ends? And that's where I thought, like, that's the biggest point of a pain point for most creators. Like, they want to keep getting discovered by new and new fans.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's how my journey started. And like last year and a half, I have picked it up a fair bit. I started connecting with the community again. And like, I have been chatting with a lot of indie creators and people who run their Kickstarter campaigns from all over the world, actually, on podcasts or in person, or like, just trying to understand where they're coming from, what their main pain points are. And yeah, this is basically comics.one that you see today is distilled from all these conversations. And this is
Mhm.
obviously a step one of many, but uh, uh, yeah. So it's come from there. It's come from a real place of myself being a writer and facing these issues, and also seeing that others face these issues as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, I mean, I write and draw, do everything in my comic, and to do the campaigns on my own in addition to that was just pretty tough. And I've heard this from a lot of other creators too. And on top of that, just to go in between campaigns, like you're saying, that's a real dead zone. And if you're, creating another comic, it's hard to even network. I kind of would, like, network a little, be posting things, talking to people, and then, like, disappear for a few months, make another issue. And that's a real momentum killer in terms of your social media presence and things like that, and just, the fun of talking to other creators and fans, and being a part of the community, which is great. So I think that's I work with Zoop, and they're great in terms of taking so much of that burden off. And I think there's a lot of other platforms springing up, like comics, that are really looking at, like what you said, pain points there. I can tell you have a business background using terms like that, but really paying attention to that. Like, hey, this is where you really get tripped up. This is where people lose momentum, and that's just really great to see. And it's great to see there are people within this community addressing that, looking at like, okay, where do we have problems? If we want to keep doing this, I think we all do. How can we make that happen? It's another comment here from Joey about X-Men Volume 2, Number 1. That's definitely, it wasn't my first comic, but is the one I remember doing a cross-country trip with my family as a kid. That was like the one comic I had with me, and I read it just over and over again
Yeah,
every
yeah,
day for 2 weeks. So it was a memorable one.
yes.
Luckily, I think we all had about 5 copies of it, and that worked out pretty well because it was looking pretty ragged by the end of the trip.
Yeah, my daughter currently she's reading the Green Lanterns one, the run
Okay.
from DC Universe Reborn,
Hmm.
where they introduced two new Green Lanterns, Simon Baz and
Okay.
Jessica
Yeah.
Cruz.
Yeah.
She's actually a massive fan of Jessica Cruz, and that like she just wanted to see where it all started. She's it's not super age appropriate, but she still wants to read it. Yeah.
I look back at some of the comics I read when I really got into reading them. I was about 10. Collecting them on my own, not just like here's a comic book, go read it, and keeping it, but like really like, oh, I want to find this one. Like there was stuff in there that was not super age appropriate in retrospect, but
Uh,
I think I turned out okay. I'm sure I will too. But I'm going to bring up the comic site here, and unless you'd like to bring it and kind of just steer us through kind of a visit
yeah,
um,
sure.
to the site. If you want to bring it up, that might be better. That way you can kind of guide us through kind of where what you see when you get there, what portals there are for creators, what's your experience as a visitor, and you can kind of walk us through how some of these features really work and are valuable to readers and creators.
Absolutely. So when you come on comics, you do see a section of trending comics where we show you some of the most recent comics that have been added to the website. Um, and then there's a section where you see some of the coming soon,
Hmm.
yeah, to the platform. You can you can literally click on any of the comic books. You
Like
can
to see Spider
see,
Squirrel, of course.
yeah, Charlie's fantastic,
Charles great.
and yeah, I love Spider Squirrel. I just love the whole universe that they have created. So yeah, every creator, like I said, they get a profile, and they also get a storefront. Charlie's brand is Zion Studios. They get a storefront where they can show off all their work and they can tell a bit about themselves. And the creators get a profile as well.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
well,
this
this
is
is
this
fine.
is the ecosystem part kind of kicking in a little bit. So these are just I'm just laying some tracks for like to grow the ecosystem in future where people can have profiles, they can follow
Mhm.
each other, and then as creators you can actually send updates to your fans and talk directly with them.
Mhm.
um, Things like you can test pages with them, or you can, while you're actually creating something, you can say, oh yeah, does this page track well with you, or does this idea of
Mhm.
story track well with you, um, things like that.
Yeah, and
um,
that's great. Especially with so many of us. I mean, you're bringing a lot of social media into this, which is great because I think a lot of us are running into the issue on would be that with Twitter, X, or Instagram. Everybody feels like it's not geared to comics, and in that it's frustrating because we're kind of here to build an audience for that, and it's
exactly.
just not set up for that. It's not quite the right tool, and it's great to see something that's kind of trying to do all these things at once in a great way.
Yeah. Thank you. And yes, like I said, you can bring your entire team. So if you see like you can be a writer and you can have a pencil and colorist and you can bring your entire team. I see so many platforms, and I see people, uh, just one creator or one name on it.
Hmm.
That's not how it goes, right? Like every comic has a bunch of people behind it. A lot of people have different kinds of efforts on it, right? So
Hmm.
why not show your entire team?
Yeah.
um, yeah. And also, this also cuts across several different comics as well. So, for example, if this penciler has worked on another comic, you can actually add a collaboration, and they can be visible in several different places rather than um, uh, just in one place. Also, when you see their profile, you will be able to see all the work they've done. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like adds that LinkedIn kind of effect for comics, where
Yeah.
you have your portfolio here as well. So yeah.
Oh, that's great to see. I mean, there's a little bit of like League of Comic Geeks, or even when I had Marvel Unlimited, they'd have you could go by writer or art. For me, it was always the artist I was looking to follow. But it's great to have that option. It's just, and I think you really see a difference between platforms that are, like, not just built. Even some art, art platforms like say ArtStation or DeviantArt are built for artists, but it doesn't really. You can always tell when something's not set up for comics. It's great to see, obviously something that is, and there's so much collaboration within, the comics community and all the indie comics, community, that it's cool to see, to follow somebody's work from one thing to another. So that's really cool to see. And yeah, I mean, it's this a very well thought out, I think, answer to a lot of the problems a lot of us are running into in crowdfunding. Is crowdfunding's getting more mature and a bigger part of the comic sphere. That's we're going to need things like this that kind of work well. And the cool thing about what you've done is I think you're a creator. So you, like I said earlier, you're looking at things where, hey, where's there a problem? Not just sort of creating a platform and, kind of thinking about it. You've run into all these issues yourself a little bit. I know I have. So that's really cool to see. Um,
Absolutely. There's plenty of other ideas that have come from the community. Like, for example, I think there was a creator who told me that if they can do proper contracting, like just do like pay the fellow creators through the platform, because they were a TTRPG creator, and they
mhm,
use drive through comics and drive through TTRPG. Um, and they said, like, they have a team, and every time they have to go through the process of paying the team, um, getting the right contracts in place, and all of those things, right?
mhm,
They have to follow a very lengthy process, and the experience is not that great.
mhm.
So if we could bring something like that, it would be amazing. Yeah, I don't know if I can do it right now, but maybe some point in future. Who knows? So yeah.
Yeah, that would certainly cut down on the drama within, I guess, between, your publishers, creators, all that stuff. So I think that would be welcome. But yeah, it's really cool. So you've got a pretty good roster of creators on here already, as you're starting out, which is great to see. These are all really good looking books. Can you explain a little bit more about, the crowdfunding uh, part? Or I know you're looking to add crowdfunding here. How are those campaigns going to work, in comparison to what you see on Zoop or Kickstarter or any of the other platforms?
Definitely. So crowdfunding at the moment, as I said, is in infancy, in terms of. So I'm still building out that idea, but
Hmm.
the biggest thing you can do with the crowdfunding that we're creating is you can first add support for series. A lot of creators have actually requested that they want to launch a series of crowdfunding
Hmm.
campaigns, for, like, say, if they want to launch issue 1, 2, and 3 together, they should be able to do that as a part of the same crowdfunding campaign.
Hmm.
The other one is obviously adding their entire back catalog and creating different bundles. Uh, t- Fulfillment in different countries, the physical copies, and easy being able to do that very easily, via, instead of just stressing out yourself, you can just use one of the partners that we have,
Hmm.
and we can do that entire fulfillment process for you. So again, like I don't know the economics of it just yet.
Hmm.
What's I know Kickstarter charges 10%. They're big, and they but I know for sure that we are very much willing to provide a huge network and service from our side in terms of helping the creators promote their work.
Hmm.
um, One thing that creators don't a lot of creators don't realize at the moment. I think they do, but a lot of times it takes them a couple of failed campaigns to realize that, is how marketing and PR is actually such an important part of
Hmm.
both
Oh yeah.
crowdfunding, as well as regular comic creation. Like it is not any, like, especially if you're an indie creator, right? You're doing everything yourself. You're not really relying on direct to market distribution or anything of that sort, right? So you are the distributor, you are the Diamond Comics, and you're doing everything yourself. So just having a roster of PR professionals to choose from for your campaign, and not stressing about it
Hmm.
directly through the platform, can actually help them in a big way. Like, just adding collaborations, finding collaborators, finding artists for your campaigns, all those kind of things. I'm going to add, yeah.
And I think one thing that's really, become really obvious, I think, as a lot of creators, myself included, have found that their engagement has really changed on Twitter in the last few months, and so many of us rely on that as one of our primary forms of marketing. Um, I think that kind of hit everybody that was starting a campaign in July, August. When they started their campaign. Not that you don't keep an eye on these things, but you're getting a campaign ready. You're not looking at everything at once. I think there's a real value to having somebody that's doing PR and marketing all the time, or not constantly, but always is engaged in that part of it. They're going to notice, hey, yeah, Twitter's not doing so great right now, but Instagram's doing great. Or there's been an ebb and flow where buying ads on Facebook was doing great. I've heard people saying like they get $10 back for every $1 they spend on those, and then like a year later there was nothing. They weren't worth doing. So as these algorithms change, and I feel like complaining about algorithms is a comic creator's pastime now, but there is some element to it where that's always changing. And as a creator, if you're putting together a book, you're working with your team, or even sourcing printers, getting that part of the campaign ready, it's really hard to be like, wait, is Twitter still good for comics and images, or do I need to be on TikTok or this or that or Blue Sky? As
Yeah,
a creator, it's really hard to be constantly up on that when you're doing all these other things. And so people like Joey, a lot of other folks that do that are going to have a little bit of that knowledge and tell you which way the wind is blowing at the moment, because at least in comics it changes pretty quickly.
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I would even say, like, a lot of successful creators do one very simple thing.
Hmm.
They actually have a mailing list, and they talk to their audiences very often.
Yeah.
Like, maybe just start a Substack. It's literally free, right? To start a Substack. You can just write regularly to your fans and regularly to the people who are on your list. They are
Hmm.
the ones who are going to come back again and again and crowdfund your campaigns, right? Like,
Sure.
um, yeah. So, like, uh, as I said, marketing is an important part of it. So once you're building your campaign, you can look at it in terms of a business decision, rather than as much as it is a creative endeavor, right?
Hmm.
Like, you can look at it as, this this is a PR and marketing part of my campaign. This is the distribution. This is the printing and fulfillment
Hmm.
part. This is where I get the critical mass of people on social media and things like that, and that's my reward. So my your part, the biggest part you have to worry about is creating the comics, and making sure that you're sending the right message to the people. So that,
Yeah.
if like if it I want to make sure we take the biggest stress points out of crowdfunding, when it
Mhm.
hits, for especially for comics. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that that thing you keep coming back to, the stress points, is really critical. I mean, it's always going to be stressful to put together your own comic and do it yourself. I think the way the industry is changing, it's going to be a little bit chaotic at best for the next few years. And I mean, this is what I think you need to do as a creator, hands down, is you need to be putting your own books out. So anything that takes a little bit of that stress out of it, because you can only wear so many hats,
Yeah.
is going to be a great thing for creators. And Joey's saying, which is completely right. Marketing tip is build your base where they engage you most, and that's something we always have to keep an eye on. And like you're saying, getting a mailing list, finding those people, that 1,000 or so people you need to kind of make this sustainable. That'll kind of follow you from project to project and from book to book. That's what you need. So yeah, that's certainly, and that's what I think what you're doing here is really cool, in that you're looking at a lot of these things together. Like, okay, what stuff does it make sense to have on one platform and just really be quickly, connected to one another.
Exactly, exactly. In the end, like these pieces are connected. They're like, pieces of jigsaw puzzle. Crowdfunding connects to the marketplace and then the social aspect of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So um, the way it will work is, if you're on, say, if you've created issue 1 and 2, you're already selling that on the marketplace, and issue 3 you want to crowdfund, so you can start a new campaign for issue 3 in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Once your crowdfunding campaign ends, issue 3 automatically goes into the marketplace, and you can
Yeah.
keep selling it, basically. So it doesn't stop. You don't stop selling once the crowdfunding ends.
Well, and that's good. And I guess that I get a ton of questions all the time from people who, I backed issue 2 and 3. Where can I get 1? Or I missed the campaign for 4. Where can I find this? And I'm sometimes that's very easy to address. If a campaign's about to start and that book's going to be offered, and at other times it's like, I think we're going to reopen it when we go to print, and it's not an easy answer, which is what I always want to give people. If somebody's interested enough to reach out to you, that's
Yeah.
great. You want the answer to be like, yes, here it is. You can buy it right now. And that's not
Exactly.
always possible, but it sounds like on a platform like this, that's created to give you that moment where you can say, yeah, we just ended the campaign, but you can hop on there and get it right now. And that's I think a real boon to, because I mean, you've got to communicate with your audience, and you've got to make things as easy as you possibly can for them. While we as
Absolutely.
creators want things to be easy for us, we need things to be streamlined for people to, how can I make it easy for you to back this book? That's the goal. So this is great to see.
Exactly. And look, I think it's also quite underrated how expensive it is to actually make comics. And,
Yeah.
it's easy not to see that, because you see, so when you're part of the community, you have hundreds of comics or thousands of comics being created, every month.
Mhm.
And it's easy to forget that if you have to bring a new comic to life, you end up spending anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000, right? Just raising that kind of money in itself is a huge challenge for most people.
Oh yeah.
um, so yeah, again, like, I keep coming back to the same point, but the point is, when you're in that in between cycle, if you're making enough money, you may not stress enough for your crowdfunding campaign, because your existing catalog is actually doing some work for you, right?
Yeah.
So and that's the idea.
Yeah. And that's the thing. If you're creating books, you're working, and that's, you need for those things to be out there building your presence while you're doing that, because you need to do both. And
Exactly.
that's the thing. And to that point, Joey had a comment here. Will PR and marketing professionals be able to create profiles for hire as well, on the
That's a good
platform?
idea. That's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that, but yes, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll keep a note of that.
Well, I think it would be good. Like you said, it's great to have everything in one place. Any ads or even creative teams to just reach out to one another and say, hey, I need an artist for this book, or I'm looking for a logo, anything like that, or just people looking to collaborate, brainstorm things. That would be a great place to do it.
Yes, that's definitely on the card. So that's the social aspect of comics dot one. That will be the connective tissue between crowdfunding and the marketplace, where people can collaborate with each other. Creative teams can be formed, and yeah.
And I had a question. I guess this is more a reader focused kind of social aspect. Is there any plan for, like, if you click on the book and you're going to read it digitally, like on the platform? Is there like a comment section? Because one thing I loved about when some of the more like CBR and Bleeding Cool were a little bit more before social media really took over the comic, review landscape. People would talk about the issues in the article about the issues on, like, say, Bleeding Cool. I really loved that. You could just see what people's reactions were to plot twists, to characters, to art, to creative teams, even editorial stuff. It was really cool to see that play out in the comments, and just to combine the social aspect you get about talking about something like this on a Facebook group or a Twitter thread, and it's all in one place, and you can kind of concentrate it there. Any plans to
Yeah,
do something like that?
yeah. So that's a great idea, and that's definitely something that's at the back of my mind. So the way that I have thought about it is to. Do you remember Amazon, IMDb used to have forums
Yeah.
on each of the movies? Something to that effect. Basically, you can discuss everything about a comic on that page itself, where
Hmm.
people can actually see the entire. So this page where you see all the details of a comic.
Hmm.
There could be a forum at the bottom of it, and you can have several different threads. You can talk about plot points, or you can talk about characters, and specific dialogue, and things like that. So
Yeah.
like you said, like, have several different kinds of threads where people can chat about specific things about a comic.
Yeah, because I've loved Big Game #2 came out this week. Mark Miller's book. That's kind of a continuation of Nemesis and One and all that stuff. And it's I've seen conversations here and there about some of the plot twists and, like, oh my God, who's gonna make it out of this? I can't believe that happened. All that stuff is. I mean, I remember when Game of Thrones was on, we'd go to a bar in the city and watch it, and it was like a sporting event. We'd have,
Yeah,
be forums. People's like, I think this guy's going to get it next episode. I think this character is going to make it through the season. Just that speculation was as
yeah,
much fun as watching the show itself. And I was reminded of that when I'd see the discourse about Big Game, and, like, people, tweeting at Mark Miller, like, I can't believe you did this to this guy, and all that stuff. I mean, that's what we're here for. We love that stuff. So, yeah, that's what I think is really. I keep saying this, but it's really smart about what you've done. Is it looks like you're trying to, in addition to addressing pain points, which I think is really intelligent. We're looking at, like, hey, some of the fun things about this that we kind of do this thing over here, and then we go over to Twitter and we talk about this, and then we maybe read Bleeding Cool or something for this thing. It would be nicer to have these things in one spot,
yeah,
because I think you'd increase the easier you make for that experience to happen, the more it's going to happen, because people aren't like, yeah, I like doing this on Twitter, but I don't like going over here and doing this, or it's just not convenient.
yeah.
And that's what I think is, to Joey's comment earlier, it'd be great to see this just built around comics, because we could all do that there.
Absolutely. And like, I think there's also something really powerful about when you have readers of a particular comic. They're already fans of it, right? And
Yeah.
when fans are able to interact directly with the creators, there's something really powerful about that, because then fans can talk about their own fan theories and things like that, but then creators can chime in and say, oh, maybe you're thinking it in the wrong
Yeah.
way. uh, just
Or
that
stop
that
talking about that. You figured it out.
exactly. So I feel like, and that the one of the other issues that we have is fan retention, right? When you're carrying
Mhm.
readers from campaign to campaign, some of them come, some of them drop off. What you want to be doing is like keep these fans engaged throughout that period of lull between the two issues come out. So
Mhm.
this will basically give creators an avenue to interact with their readers, and just just keep them engaged throughout that time as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's like such a huge help because I always feel like bad when I'm like, okay, I just finished drawing this issue. Now I got to do this thing, and I'm not going to be as responsive to messages as I'd like to be, or there's just not a lot of good ways to do that. And the more you do yourself, the harder that is to accomplish. So yeah, that's a lot of fun to see, and I think I think it's really cool too. I've talked with a few other creators about this. Is like upcoming campaigns. A lot of it has had to do with like just trying to figure out smarter ways to do shipping and collect things, but I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to just run their campaigns differently. If you're going to do a series, maybe you do the whole series month by month digital and you ship all 4 out or all 5 out when you're done. I think as we have better platforms for comics, because Kickstarter doesn't really set up in a way that you can do that. So then you've got campaign for 1-2, like I think for a reader who's not just dialed into this every day, it's great when people pay attention to us once a week, but they're not going to be really in there paying attention that closely. It gets confusing. So I think that to have something focused on comics and the way we want to read comics and talk about them, just what that whole experience is going to be from beginning to end. I think there's going to be opportunities to do campaigns that are not just more efficient for shipping reasons, printing reasons, those logistics, but just we're going to find ways to make this more fun to do for readers. And I
Exactly,
think that's what I think. The more we free up ourselves to get past these logistics or make them easier to do, we can worry about what we really ought to be worrying about, which is making these stories really fun and a great experience for readers to join in on.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, I mean that's from the reader's perspective. It's definitely different in terms of the business model for creators from something like say Global Comics, where you readers actually pay a subscription fee.
Mhm.
I am not a huge fan of subscription businesses, because especially for indie stuff, because I think subscription like Netflix works
Mhm.
because Netflix actually pays for that content upfront.
Yeah.
Uh, in terms of like purchasing rights for it for say 2 to 3 years, for example. Uh, but and then that's when creators do get their due. But if you're not doing that, then I don't think subscription as a creator makes sense for them. It does make sense for readers. They get a huge
Yeah.
catalog
Yeah.
of books for say $6 a month. But yeah, for a creator, if they're getting 65 cents for like 500 views
Yeah,
or
that's
something,
just not gonna that's not
no,
sustainable to fund,
yeah,
to be able to keep working on these books.
yeah,
Especially, I mean, I don't think that works for even a writer, but especially when you're talking about art, color, lettering, or any of the other production costs that go in there. We need to find ways to, get the value out of this, for the creators to
exactly,
be able to keep doing it, and then, obviously give that good experience to the readers. So yeah,
yeah,
and I think that that's the great thing. You see this explosion of sites that aren't just Kickstarter and Indiegogo, but you're seeing all these other things that are focused on, like, okay, we're kind of hitting this speed bump here. And I ran into so much of, not to badmouth Kickstarter at all, but like when I was running campaigns there, in addition to doing it myself, I'd get questions that from a comic reader's perspective, I like that didn't bat an eye with me at all. It made total sense, but you'd have to write to Kickstarter support. I don't think I ever got answers back, but it was just very obvious that this was something that, were this built ground up to be a comics platform, which of course it isn't, and you can really not blame them too much for that. That wouldn't be a problem. That would be something that was set up to address that from the get go. because there'd be questions that were very much like, well, how do I follow along with this, or how can I go back and get a back issue easily? And it just depends on how you're running your campaign or how long you've been doing it. But the real takeaway there was that Kickstarter was not set up for comics, and certainly not for a comic series in a lot of ways.
Exactly. So yeah, I would love to address all of that.
I think you're off to a good start. The site looks good, and that's something. I mean, I'm a graphic designer, so I really, you see new sites, and it just doesn't look good. That's not a good experience from the get go. And I like that this just looks nice. And that's something I've heard when I was watching a podcast with another creator, and I think they were running it on Crowdfunder, so another newer platform. And they kept reiterating, and it wouldn't have really occurred to me to be too worried about it, but they're saying, well, it runs on Stripe, and it's safe. I've done it myself. There's a concern with a new site like, oh, is my credit card safe, and blah blah blah. Maybe as a creator you don't think that through to a huge extent, or it's not foremost in your mind, but to some readers and potential backers it is. So there's really something to be said for how nice this site looks. Everything, it just, there's confidence there, I think, basically, and that's what I like to see when things look good, because I've seen some sites they're starting out. Zoop looks great. You feel like that's a good site, all that stuff. Kickstarter obviously looks great, and I think it was the mold, so it looks like we feel like it's supposed to. Some of these other newer sites, they load a little weird, and I'm like, oh, that's not. That's just that doesn't seem too significant on paper, but I think it really does. And I've heard people mention it on the site I'm thinking of. I'm not going to name it. Like, oh, there's that huge load time, and it just feels like something's wrong. And it's already a new site. You're already kind of crossing that barrier to, hey, I'm going to try something new. And I think your site, the interface, everything about it makes that very easy. It's a good experience. And that's definitely something that's really nice to see from the beginning. This was built to look good, to function well. And it does those things first. Because I think those are kind of invisible concerns that can get overlooked.
Thank you. Yeah, I have been doing this for 18 years. I've been building web apps and mobile apps for almost like 18 years now. And I've put, I think all my entire life's experience behind this in terms of building it out. I've built this literally all alone, the whole thing by myself. But it's kind of two of my true loves marrying here, comics and technology. So yeah, just put my heart and soul into it. Yeah,
awesome to see. One question: you said you've been developing apps as well. Do you have plans, I think, for like an app that this could function not just as a website, but could be an app that will run on your tablet, run on your phone, and offer like the same experience? Because I think that, like in my case, I'm an iPad guy as far as my new comics go, for the last almost 10 years, just because I lived in New York City for a while and there wasn't the space to be carrying long boxes from place to place. Are you planning on making this an app as well, or that's going to tie into there kind of seamlessly?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. Longer answer is it is in development at the moment. I'm working with another developer who's building it, since my time is very limited. I don't want to do everything myself. I have another developer with me working on the mobile app. They're working. It's actually an iPad app that will be working first on, and then work on smaller formats for mobile phones. Like you said, iPad is actually the right place for most people to read comics. That has, even with a lot of readers whom we have surveyed, it has tested out to be the most go-to platform for people to read comic books. So that's what we're targeting first. We're going to launch on iPad first, and then we'll see how it plays out for Android tablets and others.
Well, that's good to hear, because I think I think there's been, if you had told me 15 years ago that it would take this long for digital to catch on, I would have thought it would have been the primary platform by this point. And and it speaks to how people. I'm not necessarily like a collector, with comics, but there's so many people are, and that's a great part of this hobby in
Yeah.
this field, is that people like, taking care of those things, getting them slabbed, buying omnibuses, just tracking down stuff to fill out that space on the shelf. And, that's a very important part of this experience. But I think I had to make that jump when my space became limited and I moved
Yep.
out of town. But I tended to enjoy that. It was just so convenient. I could be in any room of the house and just, start reading this comic, pick up from where I left off. And I do think that even though it has been kind of a long curve as far as digital catching on, I have to think at some point that dam's gonna break, and it's gonna be something people do more. So it's good to hear that there's not just the
Absolutely.
website, but also a really good app experience in the works.
Yeah. I mean, digital has been around for a very long time. If you know, like Comixology app has been
Mhm.
around for almost like 10 years now. And it's not so much that it has not caught on. I think obviously, like if you see the success of global comics and,
Yeah.
even like now Distillery has come up, there's so many like good digital platforms that have come up. They are quite successful. The one thing that comics though has showed us is that physical and digital both can live side by side with
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah, equal amount of acceptance. Because I think like you said, like a lot of people love collecting comics, a lot of people love to have that thing in their hands. And yeah, so that has been around for a very long time. Maybe the next generation wants digital more than physical. Who knows?
Mhm.
Uh, but yeah, that's what we are here for. We'll have both. Why choose, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. No, I'd prefer not to. So that's cool to hear. And I one question, kind of go back to something we touched on a little bit earlier. You handle some fulfillment stuff as well, correct? So you have relationships with printers and things like that you use and really help creators just put them in touch, get the format they want, all that stuff through your site.
Yes. So not at the moment. We
Okay.
That's a product that we want to support. We don't have support for physical comics as of today. We're
Okay.
building those relationships out, and we want to do it in a way that's easy enough for the creators to do that and doesn't add up to a lot of their time.
Mhm.
So yeah, it'll take some time to build that out, but it'll be there. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. I mean, I can just say when I switched from Kickstarter to Zoop, which is to say, what that took off my plate. I'm already drawing and writing the book myself, doing everything up until you sent it to press. The difference between Scarlet Twilight 3, where I was still doing everything and the campaign, and Scarlet Twilight 4, where I was just doing the book and then, obviously working on the campaign with Zoop, but they are handling the printers, handling that stuff, handling all these estimates. uh, the difference, I thought it would be a big difference. It was even bigger than I imagined it could be. As far as
Yeah.
I went from not having I would make estimates for this in my campaigns, but I'd say, oh, I think I'll be done a month after the campaign, and then we'll start
Yeah.
fulfillment or printing and whatever. I was done with Starlight Twilight 4, I think, like the first week of the actual campaign. It just was I thought it would be like a 7 out of 10 difference. It was like a 15. It was huge. So I
Yeah.
think I can tell other creators a system like this where you're just getting help with some part of it. It is a bigger difference than you'll think, and obviously the more you're doing on your own, the bigger difference that's going to make. So that's certainly something I found to be the case, and it's I have said this earlier. It's great to see so many people within the indie comic sphere not just making their own comics and helping each other out with that, but you know, you're building platforms, you're doing things that like, hey, this is going to make everything a lot easier for everyone to do. In addition to that, it just makes sense because I think there's a lot of duplication of effort when you look at, well, how do you get these things printed? Oh, where do you get your cards printed? Where are your comics printed? What are you using for shipping? Where are you getting your boxes, to mail things out? All that stuff is not something people need to figure out on their own every single time. So
Exactly.
this might be a good time to mention we're on the Geek Collective Network of podcasts, and they have a special for Gemini mailers. If you go to if you go to GeminiComicSupply.com and put in the code Geek Collective 10, which I'm going to throw in the comments in just a second here, you get 10% off, which is a great deal. And that's something I think makes a huge difference when you're estimating out your campaign, doing stuff like that. Just the cost of those boxes is a huge deal. And if I had a nickel for every time I'd see somebody complaining online about a campaign that just couldn't make it work with the Gemini mailers, tried to send stuff out in envelopes, people get really upset about that. I wouldn't get too upset about it, but like I said, my comics are not in the best long boxes. Sometimes they have sandwiches sitting on them, but that's just me. I know that the way these things show up is so important. So definitely, if you're looking to buy some of those, use that code. It definitely takes the edge off of doing the right thing, I think, for your backers and getting them. I think everybody likes to see those show up in those boxes, so that's definitely a great thing to see. And I think, again, this speaks to, we don't all have to figure out this ourselves every single time and reinvent the wheel. And I know when I was starting my first campaign out, I was a little shy about, I'm like, are people going to be upset if I message them? I don't really know them that well and say, hey, how do you get cards printed up? Or where do you do this? Or backers are asking me if I'm going to add this onto my campaign, but I have no idea how to do it. I think it's so much easier now because of things like this, that you have not just that you can do it here, which of course you can and should, and that's great, but I think it just makes it easier for people to see, all right, a lot of people are doing this, a lot of people know how to do it. There's kind of a highway for me to get to where I need to be in terms of managing my logistics and estimates and things like that. So and the marketing is a huge part of that as well. That's something that's just so hard to, even if you kind of familiarize yourself, I think, with it initially or a year ago, that landscape changes so quickly. That can just be all out the window. So it's great to see places where this can all happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also, to your point, when you mentioned about the Gemini mailer, and a point to note that is, a lot of readers do associate proper mailing with care. As
Yeah.
they know that a creator, if they package it properly, they do care about the product that they have created, and that's what helps them get repeat backers, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Or leads.
do
Yeah, I mean,
do get,
that's that, and I think
yeah,
that I've seen that comment so many times on Twitter. If I cared enough to back your book, and also, like, kind of incomprehensible, like, you cared enough to make this, but you don't care enough to send it. And I'd see pictures in like really bad mailers that looked pretty. I've seen like ones of people like duct tape UPS envelopes that are like half folded. I'm like, okay, that should never have happened. But
yeah,
the people do associate, that's the gold standard, I think, is people associate that with, like, okay, you're on top of it, you're the guy on the block whose grass is always mowed perfectly, you're on top of things, this is running how it ought to run. And it really has become an avatar for that. Whether does this person care about how I'm going to get my comic? And I don't think it's unfair for any backer to think that, although the cost can be daunting, especially if I think we're in a landscape, and have been ever since 2020, where a month goes by, shipping can be drastically different or can change. Your cost of printing can change in a big way. That's something that always made me super nervous. I'd be sitting there putting together my estimates for a campaign and think, like, by the time I have this done and ready to ship, is shipping going to still cost what it does now? Is it fair for
yeah.
me to assume it will rise? It really kind of isn't. So there's just so much there, and I think that you can be as prepared as one person could possibly be and just not be able to do all this alone. So
Yes, absolutely,
that was, I think,
absolutely.
the idea.
Yeah, and we like you said correctly, you don't have to do it alone. You have, people like us, just helping you along the way. Us, Zoop, everyone. We all want the best for the creators, and we want to help them create better books. Focus on getting their best stories out, rather than
Yeah.
focusing on the minutia of shipping or packaging and things like that. So
Yeah, and I think that it doesn't make sense to spend your time that way if you should be creating a book. And I think that one of the byproducts of, I think, crowdfunded books are becoming like what Image Comics was in the early 2000s. This is where the new stuff is happening. And I think if you look at the level of artwork, of writing, of just design and packaging you see on these projects now as opposed to 5 years ago, it's huge. Because I think
huge.
we've realized, hey, we have not only do you have pros kind of coming into the comic, the indie comics crowdfunding sphere and raising the game in that way. Um, Independent creators are also just coming in with a wealth of skills and producing just not just stories, although the stories are great, but the product itself looks great. And I think everyone's kind of realized it needs to. This needs to look as good, if not better, than a big two book. It needs to be packaged well. It needs to be really well designed. The artwork's got to be solid. I think people judge crowdfunding artwork now pretty much the same they would judge a Marvel book. And that can seem like a harsh standard, but I think that's where we want to be. That's the idea. And it takes every bit of time you have to do that.
Absolutely. I was actually speaking to on another podcast a few days ago, and one of the hosts, he is doing a Kickstarter shortly. His letterer is actually the person who lettered The Killing Joke.
Oh,
So
okay. Wow. All right.
yeah. So you in today's world, you can get a celebrity inker or a celebrity letterer to come and do work for you on an indie comic. So
I like the
it's
idea of a
amazing.
celebrity letterer. They don't get nearly enough credit, and that should be the case. I want to see in a convention superstar letterer. Who did Killing Joke? Was that Todd Klein?
I don't remember the name. I'm so sorry about that.
He did a lot of the Batman stuff at the time, but we'll have to look that up later. I guess I've kind of undermined my point there. I should know the name.
But like you said, like in just if you just look at Kickstarter's numbers for the last 3 years, post pandemic, things have changed significantly, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the comic section. So they used to do what, $11 to $12 million a year worth of comics, and now in 2022, comics was their second biggest category with nearly 70% success rate. So they ended up doing $42 to $44 million worth of comics in just 2022 alone. It's amazing, like the amount of comics being made now, and indie folks getting the kind of exposure that they are right now.
Yeah, and I think as we see, a lot of those numbers are due to like bigger, really big name creators. Neil Gaiman kind of waltzing over to Kickstarter and putting something out. I know people have mixed feelings about that. I generally think it's probably a good thing, but I can certainly see why you're over here with your first indie book, and then suddenly that happened. Like, well, that's just great. But
I know.
It's I think really good. I think I've seen so much talk in the last year about marketing, about PR, about the logistics of printing and estimates, and people talking about that. And I think the important thing is, if people want to keep doing this, like I want to keep doing this for a long time, but you have to be able to make some money at it just to keep it going. To find ways to keep, you've all this revenue that's been generated through the comics part of Kickstarter. The creators have to find ways to capture more and more of that, so they can just put it back into the product. That some of this is, and obviously it takes a lot of time to draw a great book, to write a great book, to get good letterers. Richard Starking, who is actually the guy who did Killing Joke, and he's been doing indie books for a long time. I think he did Elephant Man.
Oh wow!
Which is great stuff. But I think we're getting so much smarter about finding ways to make this work for creators, as we have creators who have really stayed in there and done better and better each time, done sustainable ways of making this work. That's going to be great, and that's going to help these books get better and better ultimately, I think. So it's great to see that. And I think that's also really the marketing help that's available. Geek Collective even helps with PR and marketing, and really they'll help you out with site design, book design, with your PR, social media stuff, and they really are good about working with every budget. And they are making things very easier for a lot of creative teams. So that's also very cool to see. I'm gonna throw that link in the chat as well. But yeah, this is it's been great talking with you about this. I think that's it's great to talk about, just getting into the weeds of a story or artwork, but it's, I think, really important also to talk about stuff like this, to focus on ways to do this better, and obviously to bring some attention to people like yourself who are not only creating their own books, but taking time out of their lives that they could be creating their own stuff to build something for the rest of the community that's going to help everybody out. So I really appreciate you coming on here and telling us about comics. I'm going to throw the link in there one more time so people can go visit this site, check out some of the books there. I just put geekcollective.net in the comments as well, who are great for PR and marketing stuff, can really just help you run your whole campaign and just really guide you to the best way to do things depending on what your book is, and we'll work with budgets and stuff like that. My book is out right now on zoop.gg for a few more days. It's called August Purgatory Underground, and is a kind of a sci-fi action comic that, if you're a big fan of Star Wars or 80s cartoons like He-Man, you're going to like a lot. And I think that's it for us. We've talked about comics. I really would like everybody to go check that out, because I think it's just awesome to see people creating things like this. So Saurabh, thank you again for coming on. It's been great to have you here and great to meet you. And I think that'll do it for us this week.
Thanks a lot for having me on the show, Ben. I really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And I will see you next week. Goodbye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.